In every small town, the church is often seen as a pillar of community, faith, and stability. But what if I told you that behind the stained glass windows and holy sermons, there are secrets that could shake the very foundation of that trust? Reverend Samuel, a man respected by his congregation and leader for over 30 years, was hiding something that could destroy the faith of thousands. What if everything you believed about the church was actually a carefully constructed illusion? What if the people you trusted most were manipulating your faith to control you and ensure their own power? The story of Clara, a young woman who dared to reveal the truth, will open your eyes to a hidden world of corruption, deceit, and betrayal lurking in the shadows of an institution that claimed to be the moral compass of society. For years, the church had been harboring dark secrets, scandals, financial manipulation, and even a history of fraud were buried deep within the institution's walls. But when one young woman, Clara, decided to confront the truth, everything changed. She risked her life, her faith, and her community to expose what had been hidden, even when the church itself tried to silence her. This is the real story of the shocking secret the church never wanted you to know. Brace yourself for a tale of power, deception, and the courage to fight for the truth. It was an ordinary Sunday in a small town. The local church, a towering structure with centuries-old stone walls and stained glass windows reflecting sunlight, stood as the heart of the community. For most people in town, attending Sunday service was more than a religious duty. It was a tradition, a way of maintaining connection to their roots, their families, and their faith. Reverend Samuel had been the pillar of this community for over 30 years. He was a man respected not only for his wisdom, but for the warmth he exuded during his sermons. His words were comforting and full of hope, inviting everyone to embrace the love of God. For many, Reverend Samuel was a beacon of light in a chaotic world, someone they could always trust. But little did they know, Reverend Samuel was not the man he appeared to be. Beneath the calm and reassuring exterior, something far darker was lurking. He had been hiding a deep secret for years, one that threatened to destroy the very foundation of the church and the community he served. The truth was that Reverend Samuel was a member of a secret network within the church. It was not a cult, but a covert organization operating in the shadows of the religious institution, controlling information, manipulating finances, and using faith as a means of control. These leaders did not believe that the purpose of the church was merely to save souls, but rather to dominate minds and influence power within the town. Samuel was not just a passive participant in this dark plan. He was one of the key figures leading the charge, using his influence and respect to carry out these schemes without suspicion. While he preached about love, mercy, and the goodness of God, behind closed doors, he was part of a group that was exploiting these very principles to deceive and control the congregation. The idea was simple yet terrifying. Control the people through their faith, keep them dependent on the church, and manipulate them to preserve the power and wealth of the church leadership. As Reverend Samuel delved deeper into the hidden secrets of the church, the weight of the knowledge he had uncovered began to haunt him. He now knew that the church was built on a foundation of lies, but he also understood that revealing the truth would shatter the very institution that had sustained his life for so long. Despite his growing sense of guilt, Samuel chose to stay silent, driven by his fear of losing everything: his position, his influence, and his wealth. After all, it was not just his career at stake, but the livelihood of many others within the church who had benefited from the covert network of power and control that had taken root within the organization. The more Samuel learned, the more he realized that the church was not just a place of worship, it was a business, a powerful, money-driven machine that used faith as a means to manipulate and control the masses. The so-called leaders of the church were not spiritual guides, but opportunists who had learned to exploit the trust of their followers to maintain their grip on power. The documents Samuel found revealed that this manipulation had been going on for decades, dating back to the very founding of the church. Financial fraud, bribery, and even the suppression of dissent had been systematically carried out by those at the top, all in the name of protecting the church's image and its wealth. Samuel's role in this web of deceit was more significant than he had ever realized. As one of the key leaders in the church, He had played an active role in covering up the financial scandals and silencing those who dared to question the church's authority. For years, he had been complicit in the manipulation of church funds, the forging of documents, and the corruption of what was supposed to be a sanctuary of truth. But what disturbed him most was the realization that the church had not only been stealing money, but had also been systematically undermining the faith of its members. The church's true mission was not to help people connect with God, but to keep them dependent on the church's leadership. Reverend Samuel's life had been intricately intertwined with the church's dark secrets for so long that he had become numb to the weight of it all. The guilt of his actions, the lies he perpetuated, and the harm caused by the manipulation of his congregation had slowly eroded his sense of self. But despite this, Samuel remained steadfast in his position, clinging to the power and influence he held within the church and the community. The facade of faith that he projected was carefully constructed, and he feared that if it were to come crashing down, he would lose everything he had worked for. However, the truth had a way of finding its way to the surface. Samuel's carefully crafted world was beginning to crack, and it wasn't long before a young woman, Clara, unwittingly stumbled upon a truth that she was never meant to discover. Clara had been a dedicated volunteer in the church for years, participating in various events and helping to organize charitable initiatives. She had always admired Reverend Samuel and viewed him as a wise and compassionate leader, someone who truly embodied the teachings of Christ. But her trust in him would soon be shattered. One day, while going through some of the church's old files, Clara came across a set of documents that detailed a series of financial irregularities. These papers, hidden deep within the church's archives, revealed how the leadership had been embezzling money, inflating donations, and forging records to cover up their illegal activities. Clara was shocked and horrified by what she read. She couldn't believe that the very institution she had dedicated her time to was involved in such corruption. As she dug deeper into the files, she uncovered even more disturbing revelations: psychological manipulation, the suppression of dissent, and the systematic silencing of anyone who dared to question the church's practices. At first, Clara didn't know what to do with this information. She was torn between her loyalty to the church and her conscience, which was urging her to expose the truth. Clara's decision to expose the church's hidden secrets was not one she took lightly. She knew the risks involved. She was about to go up against one of the most powerful institutions in the town, an institution that had shaped her entire life. For years, she had been taught that the church was a sacred place, a pillar of truth and morality. But now Clara understood that the reality was far from what she had been led to believe. The church was a machine, built to control, manipulate, and deceive, and she could no longer turn a blind eye to its dark underbelly. The weight of what Clara had uncovered, financial fraud, psychological manipulation, and the systematic abuse of power, was staggering. She knew that bringing these secrets to light would shatter the community's trust in the church and its leadership. Many of the town's residents had grown up with the church as a constant presence in their lives, and the thought of exposing its corruption seemed almost impossible. But Clara understood that in order to protect the integrity of the community, the truth had to come out, no matter the cost. For weeks, Clara quietly gathered evidence, compiling testimonies from former church members who had witnessed the manipulation firsthand. She spoke to people who had been silenced by the church's power and fear, people who had been afraid to speak out because of the consequences. One by one, they shared their stories, confirming the corruption that had been going on for decades. Clara knew that these testimonies would be crucial in exposing the truth, but she also knew that they would make her a target. The church leadership would stop at nothing to protect their secrets, and Clara was now the greatest threat to their power. Despite the fear that gnawed at her, Clara pressed on. She began recording interviews with former church members, documenting their experiences and the damage caused by the church's actions. She also gathered financial records, showing how money meant for charitable purposes had been funneled into the pockets of the church leadership. When Clara finally decided to go public with the church's secrets, the impact was nothing short of explosive. What had been a small-town scandal soon became a media firestorm, with the revelations of corruption, financial fraud, and manipulation reaching the ears of people far beyond the church walls. The town, which had once viewed the church as the cornerstone of faith and morality, was now forced to confront the truth about the institution that had shaped their lives. Clara's bravery in exposing the church's darkest secrets led to a massive public outcry. Many longtime members of the congregation, who had faithfully followed Reverend Samuel and the church's teachings for decades, were left in shock and disbelief. For them, the church was more than just a building. It was a sanctuary, a place where they had found meaning and purpose in their lives. The idea that their beloved church was built on lies and manipulation was incomprehensible. Some people couldn't handle the weight of the truth and left the church, unable to reconcile their faith with the corruption that had been exposed. For many, this scandal marked the end of a long era of blind trust in an institution they had believed to be beyond reproach. Reverend Samuel and other key figures in the church's leadership were forced to confront the consequences of their actions. As the investigation into the church's finances and practices deepened, it became clear that their empire of deceit was crumbling. Many of the church's leaders were removed from their positions, and some faced criminal charges for their involvement in the financial fraud. The church, once seen as a beacon of morality, now found itself at the center of a national scandal, its reputation shattered beyond repair. As the fallout continued, the town became divided. Some rallied behind the church, insisting that the institution still held value despite the corruption that had been exposed. Others, like Clara, argued that the truth had finally come to light and that it was time to rebuild a faith that was rooted in honesty and genuine connection with God. As the dust settled from the scandal that had rocked the church, the town slowly began to heal. But it was clear that things would never be the same again. The church, once viewed as the moral compass of the community, had been exposed as a breeding ground for corruption, manipulation, and deceit. The shocking revelations about Reverend Samuel and the church's leadership had forced the town to confront the uncomfortable truth about the institution they had trusted for so long. For Clara, the battle was far from over. While she had succeeded in exposing the truth, the aftermath of her actions was taking a heavy toll on her. Many in the community turned against her, viewing her as a traitor who had destroyed the very foundation of their faith. The church's leaders, once seen as righteous figures, were now viewed with suspicion and disdain. Some people who had once been her closest friends now avoided her, unable to reconcile the woman they had known with the role she had played in exposing the church's dark secrets. Yet Clara knew that she had done the right thing. Her decision to speak out had been motivated by a deep sense of moral obligation, a belief that the truth, no matter how painful, had to be revealed. And though the consequences had been devastating, she could see that her actions had sparked a much-needed awakening within the town. People who had been blindly following the church's teachings were now beginning to question the very foundation of their faith. The idea of a God who cared for their hearts, who loved them unconditionally, was starting to resonate with more and more people. No longer were they willing to submit to an institution that used fear and manipulation to control their lives. Some people in the town, particularly those who had been the most faithful to the church, began to see the true nature of the leadership they had once trusted. They started to search for a more authentic connection with God, one that was not rooted in the control and deceit of the church. The aftermath of the scandal left a deep scar on the town, one that would take years to heal, if it ever did. The once unified community, bonded by faith and shared traditions, was now divided. Some chose to abandon the church altogether, unable to reconcile their beliefs with the corruption they had learned about. Others, though hurt and betrayed, clung to the hope that their faith could still be redeemed, independent of the institution that had led them astray. The damage was irreversible, and the scars of betrayal ran deep. For Clara, the road to healing was equally difficult. Despite the support she received from a small group of individuals who shared her desire for truth, the majority of the town saw her as a threat. She had destroyed the sacred institution that many had relied on for comfort and guidance. Her actions had caused the breakdown of the community, and in their eyes, she was a pariah. Clara was ostracized by many of her former friends who turned their backs on her in favor of holding on to the comforting lies they had once believed. But Clara stood firm in her decision. She knew the truth had to be revealed, no matter the cost. While it was painful to lose so much, her community, her sense of belonging, her place in the church, it was also liberating. She had removed the veil that had kept the town in darkness, and now for the first time, people were seeing the truth for what it was. They were being forced to confront the reality that the church, the very institution they had trusted, was nothing more than a tool of control and manipulation. Despite the personal toll, Clara had a sense of peace. She had done what she believed to be right, and she could live with the consequences. She had exposed the lies, uncovered the manipulation, and given people the chance to rebuild their faith on their own terms. That was more than she had ever hoped for. Clara had shown others that the truth could set them free, even if it meant sacrificing everything they thought they knew. As the dust continued to settle, the final chapters of this dark chapter in the town's history were being written. The church as an institution was forever changed. The scandal that had rocked the foundation of the community had left deep emotional and spiritual scars, but it also created an opportunity for growth and renewal. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the possibility of real change, both within the community and within the hearts of its people. Clara, though still an outcast in many ways, had found peace. She had sacrificed so much, but she also understood that the truth she had fought for was worth the cost. The lies that had once upheld the church's power were now exposed, and people were free to rebuild their faith, free from the manipulation that had bound them. Many of those who had once blindly followed the church now found themselves questioning everything they had been taught. For some, the revelation was a painful awakening, but for others, it was a liberation that allowed them to seek a deeper, more personal connection with God, one that was not controlled by the hands of men, but driven by their own hearts and consciences. The town began to experience a quiet revolution. People began to see that faith was not about conformity or submission to an institution. It was about love, compassion, and a personal relationship with the divine. The church had once been the center of their lives, but now, faith was something that could be found in their own hearts, in nature, in kindness to one another, and in the silent moments of reflection that allowed them to reconnect with their true selves. Reverend Samuel, meanwhile, faced the full weight of his actions. His once powerful position had crumbled, and the community that had once adored him now shunned him. The church under his leadership had betrayed the trust of its congregation, and there was no coming back from that. Samuel had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with organized religion, an embodiment of the dangers of unchecked authority and the corrupting influence of power. The journey that the town went through, the revelation of the church's secrets and the subsequent fallout, serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of truth and the profound effect it can have on a community, both in the short term and in the long term. The road to healing, after all, is not easy, and the process of uncovering a painful truth can shatter everything we once believed. But even in the midst of pain, there lies the potential for rebirth and renewal. The people of the town had lived under the illusion of truth for so long, held captive by their blind faith in an institution that promised salvation while secretly exploiting their trust. But when Clara, the brave young woman, exposed the truth, it created a ripple effect that spread far beyond the town's borders. People began to question the power of authority, especially when it was used to control rather than nurture. They began to see that true faith was not about submission to an institution or its leaders. It was about a personal relationship with the divine, grounded in authenticity, compassion, and honesty. In Clara's courage, we see the transformative power of truth. It was her willingness to expose the corruption that allowed others to see the lies for what they were. While Clara herself suffered the consequences of her actions, being ostracized, losing her community, and facing the wrath of those who felt betrayed, she was also the catalyst for change. She risked everything to bring the truth to light, knowing that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way for the town to truly heal.